a celebration of the Pakistan's 75th in relationship to the UK and the bilateral relationship between the two countries. We launched the season back in March, and we've been running more than 15 programs, 15 large-scale programs, and there's dozens of other smaller programs across Pakistan and the UK. So that's, just to share a little bit about the context. The season itself is titled New Perspectives, and our goal is to engage young people across both countries and try to nurture new collaborations and partnerships and develop, new creative ideas. I'm proud to say that as of today, we've already partnered more than 54 institutions in between the two countries. We worked with about 30,000 people face-to-face, and the direct reach online has exceeded, I can't remember, it's 5 million, no, not 500 million. So we basically sharing those numbers because I want you to get a sense of the kind of hype we've been creating and what all the efforts. As a part of that program, we have been working with Art South Asia Project, and this partnership has been incredible because we were able to deliver 2 research programs and 1 training one, professional development one. So what you're attending today sits within that wider program with Pakistan under this season. And I'm not going to say too much about it because I'm very excited to share that we have Nour and Mala from ASAP who are here in Pakistan. We'll be sharing a lot more about the project. Nour will be speaking about it in just a minute. But before I pass on, I just want to say a few thanks. For the season, we've had a number of partners, as I mentioned, the Pakistani High Commission, the Balagamwala Foundation, particularly Balagamwala, who has been a powerhouse. And for those who don't know him, he's been incredible, not just for the Pakistani season, but the number of programs that the Balagamwala Foundation under his leadership has supported, just in general, supporting links between Pakistan and generally South Asia with the UK has been fantastic. So there's a lot of interesting partnerships there. If you'd like more information about the season, you can visit our website. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Salima Hashmi, who's been incredible under this program, and you'll hear from her in a second. Dr. Samina, Iqbal, Ambreen, Siddiqui, Sophia, Thank you, yes, I didn't write that correctly. And yes, and with that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pass over to Nour. And again, thank you so much for attending today.
So I want to firstly thank the British Council, Pakistan UK's New Perspective seasons to be able to bring all of this together and all of you together here. Thank you to everyone that attended the workshops and are here for the panel discussion as well. It's been such a tremendous afternoon, I have to say. I think we've all learned so much from everyone, and not just from the wonderful panelists sitting here right now, but from everyone that has participated in the workshops as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to read from my iPhone, so don't mind. We would also like to give a big thank you to Como Museum for hosting this for us. A massive thank you to Seher Kareem for giving us this space. And then Hassan Sheikh, who has just done everything above and beyond. And please take a bow. He just did a wonderful job for all of us. Just to give you a little background on Art South Asia Project. It is a UK-based arts education and development non-for-profit. It supports education and partnerships and collaboration all throughout South Asia. And we are defining South Asia as Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, and of course the UK diaspora. And what we aim to do is to connect people throughout these spaces, individuals, institutions, and make sure that we are able to collaborate on academia, on commercial side of the South Asian visual art scene, and make sure that we're all working together without any borders, and we're all working as a unit. So this is actually our first physical event that we're doing. We're hoping to do many, many more. But if you would like to subscribe and learn more about Art South Asia Project, you can go on our website, www.artsouthasiaproject.org, and you can sign up, and there'll be lots of other Zoom webinars and resources and information that you can find. And we would also love feedback, so if there is anything that you would like to learn more about, please let us know, and we'd be happy to look into it further. So today's panel discussion is called From Art School to Research, a guide toward navigating through the arts. I'm going to start off with all of our panelists here. First, Ambreen Siddiqui. She teaches research and methodology at the NCA and for their Master's Visual Arts program. She also does mentorship programs for artists and art professionals through her portal, Ambreen Art Mentor. Then we have Sophia Balagamwala, a multidisciplinary artist and curator based in Karachi, whose research is grounded in archives and the active narrative building within museum context. Then we have, Samina Iqbal, who is an artist and art historian and academic, currently working as an associate professor for the Lahore School of Economics in Pakistan. And then we have Mrs. Hashmi, Professor Salima Hashmi, who really does not need an introduction, as we all know. So when we were thinking about this panel discussion, we were thinking about the educational systems that are in Pakistan right now and how they're being used. And thankfully, everyone here is a professor, which also works very well for us. So we are thinking about what it's like to learn how to be a visual artist and then go and figure out research and different methodologies into how you create your own practice outside of being a visual artist. And I think that's very important to learn from everyone here. And also, I think it's just good to know in general, because I also studied visual arts, but now I have gone into the non-for-profit, and I am not doing any art at all. I'm not creating, but it's something that I enjoy. So how do we navigate that through our educational systems in Pakistan? So my first question is to everyone. The field of art in general is a difficult industry to enter. What is the best advice for finding open doors or making your first steps into Pakistani art world and beyond? How did you each first enter this field?
I don't think that I thought that there was an alternative, actually. It was part of my upbringing to have artists, writers, journalists, politicians going in and out of the house. My father was a poet. No question of going in that direction. Because imagine if you're a daughter of a poet who is a pretty good poet, people will say, baap kitna bada hai, beti chhat maar hai. So that was not in there. And also, I think simply having art around one made it a possible outlet. I never thought that I would actually go into the area of fine art. I thought I would be a better designer, and some of that also. I always knew that I wanted to be in the company of a lot of people because I was tremendously shy, believe it or not. So what better than to go into teaching? And am I glad that it was art and art education that made my career something that I have loved and encouraged other people to do as well. We know that we are a very small tribe in this country, even though a large number of people make work in their homes which can be classified as art, but it never is. And that has been one of my areas of research and interest. So it was, I didn't have any other options, if you ask.
How did I come into this role? I think I was always interested in education, and so that was one of the reasons that I art and education were married for me in that way. And then I was always interested in how to have, and I guess my recent development in working with artists is how they can write about their work themselves. So not have other people write for your work, but how you write for your own work yourself. So that's been the primary interest in trying to do Art Mentor and create opportunities. And then the other thing that I felt was happening with a lot of my graduate students was that they would come out of grad school and they didn't know what to do with their degrees. And to then find things that would appeal to them, so having open calls and having the opportunities like residencies or grants and making them aware of it was something that I really wanted to work towards.
So for me, it's very important to have a sense of community. And there's two routes that I saw. The first route was because I didn't go to art school college in Pakistan. I really felt like I was on the fringes and I had to somehow immerse myself, build community. So the first thing I did was that I started teaching in Indus Valley, where the students, my colleagues, they became collaborators, friends, and it still continues to be an extremely nurturing place for me to think and to make. But then also, institutions aren't for everyone. And so, I think sometimes you have to develop your own infrastructures, your own spaces to meet the kind of people that you want to work with. And one of the first things I did was with a painter called Siddiqui. And her and I started this small thing called the Curator group. And we would just sort of make quirky posters and put out an open call, and then people would sign up and present their work and talk about their work, not in like the gallery setting, although eventually we were invited to do show reviews. But it was more about talking about work on itself, how comfortable place, working through problems before you get to that gallery show when everything fits and looks much better. So with the grid group and organizing little workshops, animation screenings, zine making workshops, all these things that I wanted to do, and then through this I met other people who wanted to do the same thing. So I think my way of working has always been, if you don't see something and you want to do it, then you kind of make that space, and then there's always other people who want to do that thing. So you take that plunge, and then others sort of, join in, and you meet people.
So honestly speaking, when I graduated from NCA in 97, coming from a small town in Kota, I had no clue what I was going to do with myself. Fortunately, I got married, and then I went abroad to study, and that's when I started, when I started doing TA-ship, teaching assistantship, and printmaking was my major. I started to think, okay, so there are other ways to explore art, because I realized quickly that just making art and selling is not going to do it. So that was my segue into the art world, teaching strategy and teaching profession. So yeah, that's just went on, and I kept going with making my own work as well as teaching. So.
Well, this is a great segue because it leads to my. This is towards Sophia, this is Hashmi and Samina. Now you all have, studied as artists. So how were you able to translate your artistic career into the curatorial academic research that you're doing today?
So I think for me, I think being an artist gives me this unique perspective to be more appreciative of what really goes into the work that I'm going to analyze. So that just really gives me more profound experience of writing, because it's not like I'm looking outside, I don't see the techniques. I think including technique and all that goes into making an artwork, that just speaks more closely to me. So that's my take.
I think being an artist is one of the loneliest things in the world. I remember Shakiri once spoke about it, and he said, इसमें आपका कोई साथी नहीं होगा, आप अकेले होते हैं. And he went on to explain it in a very graphic way. He said, ये एक पुल से रात होती है और बहुत खुशकिस्मत होते हैं. Then he stopped himself. He said, बहुत सौ के तो कलेजे फट जाते हैं और वो कट के गिर जाते हैं, और खुशकिस्मत होते हैं जो उस पार उतर जाते हैं. I think we as artists who also teach have learned that a way to alleviate that loneliness is actually to share that loneliness with others. And that is how one comes into teaching. It is to share the anguish that is between you and the creative act, and to make others aware of their responsibility to their work. And that's how then you become deeply fulfilled, not only because you're doing your work, but because you're with other people who are sharing all of those problems that an artist faces. And in some small way, you as a teacher can contribute, and I won't even use the word contribute because that's too smug a word. It's that somehow at some point, perhaps you recognize in one another a way forward. And that's how I have been enriched by my students. They have taught me far more than I've ever been able to teach them, for which I'm eternally grateful. And I think that an artist who has the wonderful opportunity to become a teacher, I think is really blessed. And I always feel very grateful that I was given the opportunity.
So, if I'm thinking about if I'm continuing to talk about research, I think all artists do conduct their research, whether it's through material exploration, whether it's collecting the references, whether it's just spending a lot of time on a series. There's different types of ways to go about the research, right? I don't think we just arrive on our work. I think we take some time to get there, and that is the research. For me, from the beginning, I was sustaining two simultaneous practices. So I had a job with archives, exhibition making. I was working with museums. Alongside that, I had my studio practice. So for me, it was always this thing that was both of these practices were feeding into one another. So very seamlessly. So my work is about the museum has a lot of my work into it. So for me, it's less of a translation and more of this just constantly, these two practices are propelling each other and feeding each other.
I already learned so much from all those answers, which is great. Thank you. My next question is to Ambreen. So as you have spent many years mentoring artists and art professionals, what advice would you give to people who want to shift their careers into art management and curatorial studies? What helped guide you along with the path towards becoming a mentor? And what are some of the most valuable moments in your experience mentoring younger Pakistani artists and art professionals on your career?
That's a lot of questions. It's okay. But I think one of the most important things, and I said this in my workshop as well, for me has always been volunteering with spaces that you align with and your values align with. And don't volunteer endlessly, don't give your time away for free, but at the same time you learn so much from even short spurts, like 2 months at a space that you really want to engage with and really want to work with. And that's how all of my work related or things that I was really interested in, like teaching or being in artist run spaces or being a researcher, all of those came from experiences that I had as a volunteer, and they grew into either opportunities or collaborations or things like that. I think one of the most valuable things for me has been to reflect on workshops and really listen to what the participants are asking for, because and in developing the templates, I think one of the things that I was hearing over and over again is that it's really hard to get started. And so I wanted to get that first, the apprehension of just starting an artist statement or a CV or a bio. By producing something that was very tangible and you were answering very specific questions, and hopefully something would grow out from that. And it was like a starting point for them. So yeah, those are very things. I don't know if I've answered all the questions.
There was a lot, I know, but it's really great. And this is to Mrs. Hashmi. You have been able to achieve so much as a curator, as an artist, as a professor, as the matriarch of Pakistani art. That's just what I'm going to call you. So you know. What was the pivotal moment in your career which made you realize that you were able to practice being an artist, but also work as a curator, as a professor, and hold so many different hats?
I don't think it was ever a moment. I think one thing fed into the other, and I think it's probably true for so many artists today when I'm in the company of those, that it comes out of the fact that you see students' work and you want to share it with a larger audience. And that's how it came about that, two friends in Islamabad offered us space to start a gallery. The reasons were never to sell art, because you didn't in those days at all. And in fact, before that weekend, I have seen the artists who we celebrate today for, whether it's Shakir Ali or Shamsar, whoever whose work is selling at such astronomical sums, they never could sell work. They gave away their work. And if ever anybody bought it, it was so overwhelmed. I remember once, Shakir Sahib, somebody had just bought a work of his, he just started building his house. So he said, "Ye mera cooker aa gaya hai," because he didn't have the money to buy a cooker for the house. So it was like that. And starting the Rodas Gallery in Pindi was because it was a Zia's time, and he couldn't show the work that we were making. And there were very sort of, to my mind, ridiculous parameters for what could be shown and what could not be shown. And therefore this was a kind of giving a space for things for people to see that we felt were important. We were also quite Baghdadis, in the sense we said, हमें ना calligraphy दिखानी है और ना landscape दिखाना है. No reason except those were things that could be shown in government venues. So, and I have to confess that I was even more Baghdadis, because when Kulji brought his work to the gallery, I said, "You don't dikhai," he said, because there were calligraphies, and he was pretty upset at me, because of course he knew me through the family. But we said, it's our policy. And to be so cheeky, to have this kind of a policy, it was the context in which we were living and trying to make work. But I'm also happy to say that Zubaida Agha, who had promised herself that she would never exhibit her work while Ziaul Haq was, ruling the country. She said never. He went to her and he said, "Please, hamari nayi gallery, please exhibit with us." And to add a little bit of saparish, I said, "My father is coming back from Beirut and he'll inaugurate your exhibition." So she said, "Okay." So whether it was Zubaida Agha, an older, by the way, it's a centennial year, which has totally been ignored by those who shouldn't ignore it. But the thing is that she came to us, unknown place, because she realized what we were trying to do. And then we tried to blur the boundaries between art and what was called craft. So we had a ceramic show, we had a show of Bazana Nirman's furniture and so on. We were finding our way really to see what we could share with an audience in times that were very dark. So one became a curator. I didn't even know what is a curator. Come on, I just went out together with friends and looked for work that we thought was important and should be shared. I was not a writer on art, but we did some good shows and nobody wrote about them. So we started doing that work also. Started writing about it. Unlike Samina, I'm not trained, I'm not a scholar. I just wrote because it needed to be done. Someone did it. That's it. And, so that's how the writing happened. And I'm quite ashamed now of some of the work that I did because it's so unprofessional. Yes, the writing was really unprofessional. But one did it, and I'm so happy that there are far better people who are building on it. I mean, that was just the beginning. So it kind of happened. It was a natural extension of teaching. It was a natural extension of making. It was a natural extension of documenting it through writing. That's it. There are no further claims. All I was lucky about was that I was one of the earliest to do it, that's all. My matriarch here for you, I'm just somebody who did it ahead of a lot of other people who've done it much better. And I'm really happy. अगर सारे उसी जगह खड़े होते जहाँ मैं खड़ी हूँ तो बहुत ही बड़ी बात है. But the writing now is so much better. It's so much more professional. Curating is so much better. So one did the beginning of it, and luckily the next generation has, made it so much better. Great. So anybody who's pessimistic about Pakistani art or the Pakistani art world is talking to their hat.
Thank you very much for that. My next question is to Ambreen and Samina. So both of you have studied in Pakistan, but have also studied at institutions abroad. Now, we understand that there are big differences in both of that, but can you tell us what the similarities are in regards to what you're studying, how the methods were, if there were any, and also, do you think if someone wants to be successful in regards to how they output their research, do they have to have Western training? Because I know that is a question that is asked several times, and I know what my answer is, but I would like to hear from you.
What is your answer?
It's no. You don't need to have Western training.
Yeah, I mean, there are differences, and those are quite obvious. I'm trying to think what the similarities for me have been. I think the students being front and center of how you need to mold your teaching. So I think the fact that you have to be very cognizant of what your students need from you has been something that's been consistent in both spaces, I guess. Because I teach writing, it's actually a little bit difficult for me to come up with similarities. I can tell you all the differences, but writing is not taken as seriously within the institutions, and so working on a 10,000 word document with students as their thesis, like to accompany their thesis, there's a lot of basics that we have to cover as well. So things like writing and sourcing your writing your citations and making sure that everything is sort of. There's a lot of disregard for plagiarism, which it's difficult for me to understand, but I'm getting better at trying to understand. I think it is a bit of a Western hang-up to have plagiarism be such a big deal. But I think the correct way to sort of many times people are just using those as influences or references, but don't know how to communicate that in a way that doesn't plagiarize. But yeah, I think the other thing that I would love for us to work more on, if we can, if there's collaborators in the space, is the libraries. So institutional libraries need to be spaces where people actually go and engage with the books and the written material, and just a lot more reading would be so nice.
So I think people are going to hate me after answering this question. Anyway, so I'll start with the similarities. I really am sorry to say I don't find much similarities between the two systems, except for the fact that all the institutes push for the production of work. That's the only similarity that I find. Second question, you said like, do you have to have a Western training? I'm really sorry, but I have to say this, that when I was studying NCA, Mrs. Hashmi wouldn't hate me after this, right? We were not really encouraged when you're reading or writing. So, when you say that you have to get Western training, so the first time I went to University of Minnesota, and my husband, Ali Raza, comes home and he tells me, do you remember the mosque that we saw like in Sanda? There's this red stone and who built this? And I'm like, we lived it. We walked past this like so many times and we didn't know anything about it. So I think in terms of training, whatever I am today is fortunately or unfortunately is what I received the training in the West. I didn't find those resources here, but here's the thing. I think people like us returning to Pakistan, I think now we can make a difference because we can make things happen in Pakistan, introducing the research methodologies and encouraging students to read and write. And I think that is the big problem in Pakistan is when I'm teaching, students do not want to read and write. This is like my ongoing struggle for the last 6 years that I've been back. Secondly, I think the idea what Ambreen is saying, plagiarism, I do think that it's a huge problem, and I don't think they're doing it in naivety. We are very smart people, except that the fact that we don't want to push ourselves to really produce our own voice. But other than that, I think. But I do have to also acknowledge, I had all my bases covered in Pakistan. So, going to NCA really enriched me with that 4 years of experience, especially like I mentioned, I came from Quetta, very scared and, didn't know anything about Lahore and everything changed after 4 years. And, I think it was the training in NCA, even if it was technical, that, I was able to go through the Western education system.
So actually, this is a follow-up to the plagiarism question and statement that you made. I mean, I've also seen it not only here but in Western institutions as well. What advice would you give to someone who is plagiarizing and from naivety or not from naivety? How would you ask them to change what they're doing?
So this is what we said. Do you want to go first?
I mean, one of the things that I've said to my art students again and again is you would not want your work to be copied. As artists, we know intrinsically how awful it feels when someone copies just your idea and not your work. It's the same thing. You're taking someone's writing or their idea and you're reproducing it as your own. It's not okay.
So I think for me, when I say so I've been teaching at Lahore School of Economics, and I tell my students first day of the class, how to quote references. I completely discourage them, but I come to know that they keep doing that because it's just an easy way out. And it's not something that they start doing in colleges. It starts really, really early on in schools. We don't address it in our high schools and middle schools or So I always tell them it's okay to take a reference, but give the quote, give the credit so that you can build your work upon it, but not use it as yours. I mean, the thing is that, what can we do is that, we can just advise. And then I also want to say one more thing is, so I realized in the US, if a student is not plagiarizing something, they are dropped out of that course of the semester. It's like this, black and white. Here in Pakistan, it's like, acha koi baat nahi, Allah nahi karna. And I think unless they just really suffer the consequences, and honestly, the thing is that we need to push them. They're very, very smart people. Unless they really are pushed to really understand and realize their talent, it's not going to change. And I think the only way we could do is teachers just re-emphasizing and going over this thing that they have a voice, and whatever voice it is not wrong. It's like everyone has their own point of view, and it's not taking credit is not all it is about. It is also about process.
I think some of these things are tied up with the question of language. I think it's a fact that 80% of the children, maybe even higher than that, in Pakistan, are studying in a language that is not their own language, which is not their mother tongue. If you look at all the 4 provinces, the children go to school. Yes, children in KPK do study Pashto. Children in Sindh do study Sindhi. Punjab, not so. The language that they speak at home is not the language which is taught in school. It is foreign to them, and we have to be honest about that. There is a huge crime for learning, the way a child learns. I was just in the company of a very well-known scholar of education the other day, who is here from America. He's just doing a study in Islamabad, that in these 2 years of pandemic, the children were out of school, in government schools. Most of them, of course, didn't do any studying at all because the schools were not equipped to go online. For 2 years, the children were speaking, listening to their own language, okay, which in Islamabad is Punjabi and Pashto, major languages in Islam. They're coming back to school now. They are totally unable to follow what is going on because the textbooks now are, of course, in Urdu and written English. For 2 years, they have not been exposed to it. To try and understand that this is the biggest impediment to all education in Pakistan is terribly important. So no wonder when a student is faced with the issue of writing a paper or answering questions in a language which is not once but twice removed from their way of expression, is a huge, huge burden, and it's a hoop that they cannot jump through. This is, and making them understand that there's something called plagiarism when you're asking them to speak in double Dutch is terribly unfair. I think we have not understood the root causes of plagiarism. Yes, it's the same all over the world. We know that. You know, kids do it, whether it's in America, and that's their first language. So it's a very complicated thing. I agree that they are not tempted to do that when they go into the studio. That's their language. They can speak it and they are confident of it. But what you do to them out of that is putting them into great temptation. And I don't have the answers. Frankly, I don't have the answers.
Why we're even asking them to write 10,000 words when it's all right to ask them to write artist statements or to describe their work, but it really doesn't have to be 10,000 words of research. That they're not doing a research degree, they're not doing an MA in research. So that's the other.
I think we're doing them a great favor when we say, अच्छा उर्दू में लिख लो. अरे भाई उर्दू भी तो foreign language है. For the majority of them, they are not coherent in Urdu. You ask them to do it in Punjabi or Pashto, they probably do a much better job.
I think I just, with all due respect, I differ with you for a second about why are we even asking them to write 10,000 words? Well, why not? I mean, the thing is that, this is something that we have been trained in. NC is like we were never asked. So I remember I was in 3rd year and Rashid Khan came back from the US and he asked us, he was teaching us drawing, and he gave us an assignment that we go to the library and do a research on an artist. We looked at him and we all started laughing. He said, what is he talking about? We just draw in a studio. We never do that. But then the thing is that, when I went to States and I started my MFA, and I was like crying the whole night. The first day I'm like, okay, I have to write. How do you write? So I think instead of saying why do they have to, they should write. We should teach them.
No, absolutely. And I'm like a huge advocate for writing and writing about your own work, writing about other people's work to understand it. But I think the expectation to write that much and at that level for Masters of Visual Arts, you should be able to explain your work. You should be able to write about it because that's how you're going to talk about it. But I don't know if 10,000 words is really necessary. I don't know.
I think there have to be provisions for the teaching.
Right, there has to be writing labs, or there has to be something to help them.
Because English as a foreign language is now a very important field of study, and they have to. But institutions don't spare the money for it. They're unwilling to give the students the benefit of good teaching and teaching them how to attain vocabulary, how to construct sentences, how to in fact learn how to write about their work and other people's work. This is an area in which there's no funding, absolutely no funding. एक मेडिसिन का टीचर ले आएंगे, वो बेचारा जो है वो मजबूर है क्योंकि क्योंकि उसको नहीं पता विजुअल आर्ट्स के बारे में किस तरह से लिखना है. So I think that this is something that needs to be seriously addressed by art schools and design schools and architecture schools for that matter, is to equip the students with proper teaching about reading and writing of that discipline, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Can I just ask one last suggestion I want to make is that, in our institute, exactly what you're suggesting, Mrs. Hashmi, writing centers is that we need, just to help out students. And, when you go abroad and we start writing, that's the first place we all go and, ask for help. So I think that's something that people are, especially art colleges, they don't invest in anything like that. But funny enough, Mayo School of Art की जो history है, they had an English teacher before it became a college.
Yes, yes, I had an English teacher.
So we dropped that, and then now we don't have that.
So we've spoken about the Lahore art educational institutions. Is it the same in Karachi?
So, what interested is that we acknowledge that the amount of labor and focus that it took away from producing the thesis work. I mean, it was a lot, and there were so many students who struggled with writing these massive, dissertations. So we reduced the word count. And I think that's been really important because there's still research and the research is supposed to be connected to your practice. So it's been very engaged, but also because it's not this gigantic thing. I feel like the students are doing a much better job. And then there are now classes to help them with research methodologies, writing, and from the first year. So that's been helpful. But I think the main thing has been we don't have this pressure of like 10,000 word thing. And also I think it's also important to think about like alternative models, like yes, read, write, whatever, but when I did my MFA and I didn't do it in Pakistan, I didn't have any word limit. I could have written 3,000 words if I wanted to. I chose to write more because I needed to, but I think there's also like a need to sort of look at these models we're following, especially if we imported them from the West, right? We need to sort of think locally what's working, especially given all of these language barriers and concerns. And is there, it's not an answer, but you have to look into locally what is possible and what is actually helpful to a practice.
I actually think research needs to come more full force into the studio, like when you're doing critiques and when you're doing, like, your research should be on the wall with your work, like, and that I'm seeing not as much. And they're expecting you to write about it, but it's not showing up in your studio, and that means that you're not, like, you'd be so much better equipped to write about it if it was in your studio and you were looking at it and engaging with it in a visual way.
Well, this now leads very well to my last question, because Sophia just touched on this. And it is, well, there are so many different institutes within South Asia and the Middle East and North Africa that are looking at all of these topics. Which ones would you suggest to everyone sitting in this room to look at, to engage with, to see how they can learn more about not only their own practices, but what they would like to research further?
I think, like, now that we're living in this global world, it's not just about South Asia. Internet has made everything so easy. So I think, like, just starting, so in our presentation also today in the workshop, we were talking about, like, organizations which are non-profit, and just that solely dedicated to research, like Asia Art in Hong Kong, or like, even Dhaka Art Summit, even what happened in the world about Benedict, like, having that component of academic, that's really helpful. But then also, like, this is really a matter of researching. Like, you have access, you don't need to go anywhere. And especially COVID has just like brought a whole new world to us. And so getting foundation and all of those that you can just look up. It's really like, we were talking in our workshop, is like, how do you research your topic? I think that's where you start. And I think now it's like, this is like, not South Asia, not it's like East or West, it's like the whole world.
So you would suggest looking at the topic rather than the region. That's the best context.
I think so. Yeah.
Ms. Hashmi?
I think that I don't know how to put this politely. Pakistan is a very anti-research country. It begins by a lot of untruths that are in our textbooks. Okay? और वो बेचारा बच्चा जो कोई सवाल करे क्योंकि घर में किसी ने कुछ कहा है तो उसका तो सर गर्म हो जाता है क्लास. So actually we live in a context in which there are too many alternative truths. So the job of a researcher is very, very difficult. I was telling the group that we just took that, 2-3 days ago, a very sweet girl called me up and she asked me to give her some quotes about September the 6th. Okay. First she made sure September 6th, 1965 I was alive. I said, very much so. I had just got married and I was, on my end of my honeymoon and here I was back in Lahore from the academy. And so she said, well, can you tell, what happened September 6th को बड़ा जोश होगा. ऐसे कोई जोश नहीं था. जितने अमीर लोग थे लाहौर शहर के, इकबाल में रहते थे उस ज़माने में, सारे अपनी गाड़ियों में बैठ के जल्दी जल्दी उन्होंने रावी ब्रिज क्रॉस किया ताकि इस शहर से निकले जहाँ पे बमबारी हुई थी. ठीक है ना. बाकी अमरूद शहर के लोग सब थे. तो so there was no Josh. And I said, anyway, you're talking to somebody who's very anti-war. So she was totally taken aback. So I said, so I don't think you can use that. She said, हाँ ये तो हम नहीं लिख सकते. So I said, हाँ क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल में सच तो लिखना बड़ा मुश्किल है. तो फिर मैं आप किसी और से इंटरव्यू करेंगे. I'm just saying that on a funny aside. But the thing is, my life is full of such anecdotes. It's not easy because you're actually swimming against the tide. And you only have to open the newspaper or listen to the media or whatever to understand that so much of it is, etc. It's a hard uphill task to try to get at the bottom of things. Any question that engages you, it is a difficult proposition. And all those people who do research, whether it's for the visual, or whether it's for writing, or for filmmaking, or any of the other ways in which we are witness to our time, it's a hard job. Before the pandemic, there was a proposal to do an exhibition for September 6th in Arts Council. And there was a large committee made, and I happened to be one of the people on that. The leading light was a historian, very good historian. But they started assembling the various components of what would be, to my mind, have been a very interesting show. It became obvious that we could not mount it. The show could not be shown. Because you show acts of, for example, individual bravery, and there were, together with acts of extreme stupidity on a wide scale. So instead of acknowledging that we are stronger when we face history, however uncomfortable it may be, you go on to be more mature as a people. That is something we have yet to come to terms with. And I think that whether it's an artist or group of curators putting together a show, it is part of history. It becomes history. We are all engaged in doing that. This event in itself is part of art history now in Pakistan. So if you are conscious of that fact, you're far more finely tuned to look for the things which to you are important, which ring true to you, and which of course become part of your education. So I think our problem has been that we, A, are not in love with history as a people. B, we discourage others from going after research which will be a history of real events and real people. And thirdly, I think that we are falling behind because of that. Because the quicker we get to acknowledge, who, what, why we got here, the better equipped we are to face the future. So I feel that any endeavor like this, and one thanks the British Council and your NGO, as well as you, Zai, for hosting us, because this is part of something bigger. And I think therefore it gains importance. It's not an easy ride, but hopefully everyone here is motivated and will go on to tell the story in their own way at places.
So I'll answer this in two parts. The first part is I was thinking about examples in South Asia and the Middle South. And I'm thinking that the Asia Art Archive and the Asia Art Archive India, these are both organizations which are interested in research and interested in exhibition making. There's funding, there's resources, there's mentorship, which becomes really, really important. And now with the pandemic, a lot more of this training, workshopping, everything is online. So that really increases the accessibility, the learning. The second thing I'm thinking about, again, this is just something that I've experienced. I can't really speak to, I guess, other models that I haven't experienced. But EMU had done this amazing online course during the pandemic. There were a number of courses, and I had taken one taught by one artist and one curator, and that was just a really fantastic model of different kinds of academics, artists, curators, some people not from the art world, but just meeting together online at this time, having conversations, discussing readings, being very open, and there was like a different level of, I guess, education and experience. So, having all kinds of questions on that same forum, that was really, really important and really eye-opening. But I think it's also really, really important. I mean, it's good we're looking at South Asia, but kind of thinking about what Mrs. Hashmi is saying about knowing our own history and understanding it. I think our own context is really, really important to look at. So, for instance, looking at critiquing, but more just really investigating, the Lahore and the Karachi biennales, what took place, how they went down. Did they support and feed the local ecologies of artists, students? Did we, are we, again, I keep going back to this, but are we taking a model from the West or East or whatever? Are we importing these models and trying to put them on our local context? Because that just doesn't always work, right? So what kind of models can we create that are coming from the grassroots level? And LPF and KP both done this in certain ways, but with every kind of conversation, exhibition, biennale that happens, really trying to understand what's really happening here and focusing on what happened in the past here, as opposed to doing these things that are really happening elsewhere, which are completely detached from what is happening here.
For me, I think South Asian, looking at the South Asian context is interesting because, again, when you're talking about importing these ideas from the West and how they work locally, it's really interesting to look at the models that have been developed from the grassroots and how they're functioning and how they're producing the kind of work that we might want to think about producing. So, I mean, there's spaces like the Triangle Art Network, right, that Brito is part of, or Khoj is part of, or Gaswork is part of, Basel is part of. There's institutions that are now focusing on research and writing. So Vicar, which is in India, is really great. Kiran Nadir Museum has really great online programs as well that you can take part in and participate in. So those have all been really great learning experiences and thinking about how we can maybe apply those same. And a lot of the times they're very simple ideas that they'll just gather 10 people and have a Zoom meeting, or they'll gather people and have a workshop. So how we can implement those ideas for ourselves is something interesting to think about. But yeah, there's lots to learn.
Wonderful space to now open up questions to the audience. I think we can take one or two at this point.
Good evening,
Hello everyone, hi Nour, I'm Hashmi, so I've been listening to this conversation and it's something very close to me. And I think most of you know that we're working on this journal for the past 3 years. Dr. Siddiqui and I had started this journal of art and design education. And biggest challenge, and now it's under the aegis of the National College of Arts. Dr. Samina is one of the editorial board members. It's been excruciatingly painful to be able to see all those manuscripts that we've received. And we're right now at a stage where we started off with 52 manuscripts, research papers in the form of essays and different kind of formats. And now we're down to almost 8 because of the multiple kind of cycles of review. We went through an internal screening, then went through the peer review 1 cycle, we're almost concluding our peer review 2 cycle, and it's been a very painful process. 70% of the editors said that this is not fit for publishing. And Dr. Samina was one of them. And that's across the board. We get to hear from, we have people from the US, we have scholars from the US and the UK, some from Europe, and about 30% from Pakistan. And they keep rejecting. And but we're constantly at it. So from 52, we're down to 8. So my question is, Ms. Hashmi maybe already answered it in some way, and she said that मुझे नहीं पता इन चीज़ों का जवाब, but where do we begin? Because we've been struggling for the past 3 years, and we're really left with 8. And that too, we still don't know whether they're publishable or not as Pakistan's first art and design education journal, whether they're fit to be even published. So I don't know where to begin. I mean, we're making our efforts, but it's really very difficult. It's painful. Where do we begin? Do we even make the effort?
I can just make this suggestion. One, for the first thing, congratulations, you have 8 articles from 52 to 8. You already began. So I think the process has started. I think we just have to stay persistent and not compromise on the quality. Even if you just get down to 4, fine. What is in the number? Why do we have to publish like 15 articles or 20? If it's like 4 articles and they're good quality, go for it. Hats off to you if you do that. So I think we've already started it. So we're good.
Also, I think we have to think of creative ways of how we can bring these topics to light, right? So if there's someone who's written about something that's really interesting, but they've written about it badly, pairing them up with people who write well, or creating those sort of networks and collaborations, and you sort of creating those collaborations is I think going to be something that's exciting that comes out of this.
So what is that extra mentorship?
Yeah, and extra writers. I mean, the only thing is like I don't need them or not, but I think everyone should be paid. Everyone should be paid. Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, so it's a very emerging curator question that I have. When Ms. Hashmi said that she had a gallery in Islamabad and Kulji came, she was like, we are not going to put up your work. So how justified is it to claim that stance as a curator? I mean, you had a stance at that time, you context, the circumstances, you your situation, but how is it, I don't know, looking at myself, I cannot claim that I'm not going to work this work, although I have it in my mind, I have my biases, of course, everyone does, but to claim that openly if my stance as a curator is this, and I am not going to look at this work, and I'm going to appreciate this work, is it justified from my end?
Yes. Yes, it's justified.
So she's saying, was it justified when she said it?
Okay, how do you put your foot down? How do you put your foot down?
एक चीज तो गैलरी होना या गैलरी की रीजन से हाई नहीं होता ना they have a mission statement. That particular mission statement for the Lotus Gallery in PT, because first it was in PT from Fairabad and later in Islamabad, was that they grew out of the need to show things that were not being shown by the government. That was what made the gallery appear. And therefore, what the government was insisting on was what we were not going to do. So we were very clear that it was against government policies, the government of that time. जो उनको पसंद था वो मैंने पसंद नहीं as a mission statement. And consequently we decided, okay, so we are not going to show that. Many years later, when there was Gupta's too, a lifetime later, I did show, what it was important, whether it was a middle or child. The context had changed. So as a curator who was sensitive to the changing context, you also alter the way that you want to present the work. Always for me, Dona's gallery was an extension of the teaching student. As I said earlier, we hardly ever sold any work. It gives money to nobody very little. When artists don't go to shoot, Dona's gallery is where you make your reputation, but you don't make any money. So that was a given. I think curators have, and there are many different kinds of curators in the world, as many artists. There are curators who are, prima donnas, who've done biennales as well as it's the way that the world should work. There are others who, for example, I had the privilege of going to Documenta this year in Castle, which was amazing. It gave me such a sense of joy to see that there could be such a biennale they have identified in the world today, where the curators was a collective from Indonesia, where they only invited collectives from the world over, where one of the finest exhibitions was this in this church of what they call, the ghetto from Haiti. I mean, the work done in poverty. And so moving that you came out in tears. And where in that documenta, the lines were sharply drawn because the right-wing racist Germans, and they were unfortunately represented in the art world also, they pummeled the Palestinians. And they forced an apology out of the curators, where the work of a Palestinian artist was vandalized. One of the finest artists was from Palestine, whose work Samina and I were traveling together, Siddiqui. It was wonderful to show. And I still remember a lovely exhibit of hers, which was a little ear made out of wax. A lot of her work was made out of beeswax, and there were drawings. And it was labeled in this snake ear. It was so beautiful. And in the catalogue, it said that there was a video made by her also, but there was no video. And I asked the guy, I said, where's the video? It says in the documentary, there's a video. He didn't know. Censored, okay, or whatever. It was not there. The documenta became a battleground for people who believe that art can be for the community. That art is not about sales, that art is not about the market, that art is for the living. Very ironic, art puzzle was going on at the same time, which is the absolute opposite of what was happening at Documenta. And the crowds at Documenta, ordinary people, there were whole parts of it which had to do for children. There were whole parts of it which had to do with participation of people who were coming. For me, my lifelong belief in what art can do for communities, it was demonstrated in document like Essayist. And I thought, okay, I can go on for years from now, confident that many people in the art world are questioning the purpose of art, and they're finding reasons why communities who are poverty-stricken still make art to make their lives easier. And I think that, you know, when one talks about biennales and things like that, I think you also right, one has to ask, what does it mean to a city? And for CASA to do this, to have the courage to invite this collective from Indonesia to be the curators, and they have a totally democratic approach to how people should be invited to be at an exhibition. It was really, really something that took the art world, you know, by storm, except when the opposition jumps in and says, "You got to and stop it." And they first stop it by saying, "Fulani is so anti-Semitic." So easy in a world where you have the genocide of the Palestinians happening. So easy. So, and in fact, interesting that I met Stefan Winkler there, and he said the collective guilt of the German people is being, you know, shouted out to document, which is true to a great extent. And I think that these questions are constantly unfolding. There's a biennale in Lahore, Karachi, Aslam, wherever. Constantly ask this question, what is art for? Who is it for? And so, anybody has that answer, an opinion, and so they should. But I was delighted that somewhere in Europe this question was being asked with such joy. And I put my hat off to that collective from Indonesia. I really, really did. They were brothers in spirit.
I think that's a great place to end. So I would like to thank everyone on the panel here, not only for being part of this very stimulating discussion, but everything that you've done with all these projects. Seher Kareen, Hassan Sheikh from Como, thank you so much for letting us use this space. Thank you to the British Council Seasons. Thank you to Costa Nostra for all the amazing coffee and snacks, and I hope everyone got to it. And thank you to everyone for coming. We're so happy.